Okay. We are southbound, currently in the state of Tennessee. We are approaching Knoxville, Tennessee on I-75, headed southbound, headed toward the Hurricane Helen, coming up Florida and into Georgia. And I'm going to be heading southbound. And I will be meeting with Helen sometime, I think, in the morning or later on tonight. That's what happens here at the Solomon Project, where it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep that counts. I'm your host, Richard Burns. And today I'm going to feel the burn. Let me give you a little breakdown. The professor asked a question. She left me with a question on one of the, try to figure out which video it was that she left a comment. Very interesting question she asked. Very interesting. I gotta find that comment. I couldn't answer it right away. It had me thinking for a hot minute. Yeah. The clock was hot because it had me thinking for a hot minute. See how I did that there? Like I'm a rapper or something. Like double entendre. Huh? Say what? Yeah. But the question has something to do with whether or not I prefer to be, oh, here it is. I found it. She asks, which one is the hardest? Working for someone in trucking or working for yourself? Listen, I don't know how I'm going to be able to answer it on this video as I take you through this tour of I-75 in Tennessee. So, of course, I started off as an employee of a trucking company. And I started that without a business mindset. Even though I worked as an independent contractor, as a cab driver, it wasn't like operating a business to its fullest degree, to the fullest sense of what a business is. At least as far as my perception was concerned, because again, I didn't have a business mindset. Even though I was an independent contractor as a cab driver, I was still operating as an employee. And that's the mindset that I had. I had the mindset of an employee. Now, when I went into trucking, I was definitely an employee. When I did become an employee for trucking, and let me preface this by saying that I am not one of these people, and this is, I'm not saying it this way because there's nothing negative about what I'm about to describe. I'm not describing this as anything negative. It's just that I'm just not the type of person that has been in or is now or nothing. I'm not into cars. I'm not into cars. I found it odd that when there was a conversation amongst coworkers and I had to describe the person that I was referring to, the person listening and conversing with me would ask me, "Oh, is that the person that drives this kind of car?" And I had no clue, because I never made an association with a coworker or anybody else that I was talking about with the car that they drove. I found it odd, but a lot of people do that. I'm just not one of them. I'm not into cars like that. And if I'm not, I'm not into cars like that, and I'm definitely not into trucks. Even to this day, I don't identify, well, actually I do now. Actually I do. There's a type of truck that if you have that type of truck, the flat nose truck, then yeah, I will remember that you drive a flat nose truck, because it's terribly inefficient to drive a flat nose truck. It has way too much drag, and you consume far more fuel than an aerodynamic truck. So if you drive one of those, yeah, I will make the association. But other than that, no. So with the trucking, when I got into trucking, I was an employee. I didn't have any expectations. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The reason why I got into trucking has nothing, again, I'm not into cars, I'm not into trucks. The reason why I got into trucking was monetary, total monetary reasons. I wasn't one of those kids that used to see the fire engine and go crazy. Wow, I love fire trucks. No, I love trucks, the little Hess trucks, the toy trucks and all that. I was not that kid. I was more into hunting my neighbor's pets, hunting their dogs and cats. No, let me stop. It just wasn't my thing. So when I got into the truck, I didn't know what to expect. The person that came to the trucking school that handed me an application didn't explain anything about the trucking industry. My instructor at the school that I went to didn't discuss the community within the trucking industry and how they behaved. My teacher in the trucking school, he was a war veteran. The guy in charge of the maintenance for the trucks at the trucking school was a former Navy SEAL. And there were other As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, I think every instructor in that school was in the military, had served in the military. And the things that went on within the trucking community, they never, I don't remember them ever discussing that. So I went in, I had no idea what to expect. I filled out the application, got the phone call. I was given a date and a time and a location to show up for an interview. After the interview, I was called again. I was given a date, time, and location to start orientation. From orientation, I went into training. My training was like 3 weeks long. When I started my training, I had to meet with my trainer by the dispatch. I kept to myself. I didn't have eye contact with any of the other drivers. I didn't say anything. I just kept to myself. I didn't have any conversations with the dispatcher, nothing. First day, okay, this is your trainer. This is where you meet. Be here on time. Blah, blah, blah. There you go. All right. Once I was done with my training and I was on my own, the only person that would greet me, or the only two people that would greet me, was my trainer and a dispatcher that was the only person that would greet me. Nobody would greet me. And then I discovered that if you didn't have 5 years of experience under your belt, none of these people were going to talk to you. None of these drivers were going to talk to you. Maybe, I won't say maybe, I think usually if they bumped into you outside at a stop, if you needed help, they would help you. But at the facility, no. Nope. They weren't going to talk to you. They weren't going to greet you, nothing. 5 years. You needed 5 years under your belt before they even said anything. Before they even said boo to you at the facility. It was my first experience being in an environment like that. I took it personally. I did. I took it personally. They tried to pull that stunt at the state job that I had, but word got around about my personal life that kind of broke that. But when I started the trucking company and they did that, yeah, I took it personally. I didn't like that. But that's the way it was. As far as the job is concerned, this was a whole new world for me. This was a new world. This was a new challenge. So, well, another thing I have to add to that was the fact that the vast majority of the hours that I spent working, I didn't have a supervisor. I was out there on my own. I had to deal with some of the receivers at the grocery stores that I delivered to. There was a good amount of them that were really nasty. In the beginning, I tried to hold my composure because it's my job. I can't do something that'll make my employer look bad. I slipped a couple of times after I got over that new employee phase. And yeah, things got physical a couple of times with some of the receivers because they were out of control. I've had the cops called on me, but the cops just brushed it off and whatever. I got called in to the safety and given a talking to. I discovered then and there that this happens more often than I thought. Some of the veterans got curious, wanted to know, and that was probably the icebreaker for them, for one or two of those guys, because they wanted to know what happened. Oh, okay, so you're not a pushover, and they respected that. And I kept working. That was my biggest gripe. Was, listen, I got into some things physically, but I don't like that. I'm not that type of person. I'm not. If somebody gets me to fight, they really cross the line. That's what I'm trying to say. Because I'm not that. I'd rather put my head down and walk away. That's what I prefer. That's my preference. I'm not that kind of person that would want to just stick their chest out and just throw their hands up. That's not me. So that was the most undesirable part of the job, is confronting receivers. The job itself, I go in, the dispatcher already knows who I am. He hands me the paperwork for the load that I'm delivering. Go to my truck, do my pre-trip. I was doing what's called slip seating. I never had the same truck. They always gave me a different truck. So I did a full pre-trip of the truck and the trailer. It was a routine every day, which should be a routine for everybody anyway. But more so when you slip seat, because when you don't slip seat, when you have the same truck all the time, you get an understanding as to what's defective and what's not, just by the way it drives or by a certain smell or something. Come in, get my paperwork, go do my deliveries. While I'm driving to the store, I'm by myself. At the store, I deal with the receiver for a little bit, because once they acknowledge that I'm there, once I have a door, once the door is open, once the pallets come out, either I'm pulling them out or a store employee is pulling them out. They sign off on the paperwork, I go to the next stop, alone again, until I get to the other receiver. Deal with them for a little bit. That's the process over and over again. As far as my employer being over my shoulder, as far as other employees being around me, the bootlickers, I didn't have that throughout the course of my day. Which is a big deal if you have to constantly be around people especially bootlickers in the state. I was swimming in a pool full of bootlickers in the state. But in the trucking, and I was doing both. I was doing trucking and working for the state. And trucking for me at that time was a psychological break, because the environment that I worked in for the state was absolutely horrendous. Horrendous. For the state, the job I had with the state, we had the highest, or amongst the highest, in suicides, in divorce, in alcoholism, drug addiction. We are amongst the highest. And those who made it past, it was 20 and out, those who made it to the 20th year and retired, on average, had a lifespan of 5 years average after they retired. That's how toxic that environment was. Absolutely toxic. So driving a truck was therapeutic. Even sitting in traffic like you're seeing right now, that was therapeutic. I started developing the business mindset. So when I reached my th or 18th year of truck driving, that's when I decided for the first time to go over the road. I forget exactly how I wound up with these people. Oh, I remember now. So, there were 2 drivers that needed help. And I was willing to help. I was willing to take a pay cut to help them. One of them chose not to have me work with him because he did not believe that I was sincere about my offer, because nobody offers that. Nobody offers to help and to take a pay cut. Nobody. He later found out, he apologized and later found out that I was sincere, because the one that did accept me, they know each other, and he broke it down and he let him know that I was serious, because that's exactly what I was doing. Company driver. With what I know, with my experience, being a company driver now is easier than what it was for me when I was a company driver before. Because now I understand the mechanisms behind everything that's done in a trucking company. And as a result of that, I have different expectations. And that difference in expectations makes it a whole lot easier, because I know what's coming. I know what's going to be asked of me. I know when someone is getting carried away. So that makes it easier for me to say no to somebody's request, and being able to explain verbally how it doesn't make sense for me, so what the person is asking of me doesn't get some response like, well, you just want to be abusive, this or that, some accusation. No. The response that I give is detailed, demonstrating my experience with the request. So they know, so the person that's receiving my response understands that I have enough experience to be able to present a reasonable argument. Usually ends there. It usually ends there. So I rambled long enough. We can go into more details about the differences, but the bottom line is that obviously it wasn't an easy question for me to answer. It wasn't cut and dry. It wasn't. But I can get into it some more in a live. In the meantime, Kitty doesn't work for me. Don't think Kitty works for me. Kitty doesn't work for me. But Kitty likes being around me, and I'm gonna let y'all hang out with Kitty too. With him. I was helping him and I was taking a pay cut. I'm helping him. This is my first time going over the road. He's with a specific company. He's an owner-operator. So he's got a truck that he's paying off. It's his truck. He's got the truck from a bank. So he's paying off the bank. And we're doing doubles. He drives 11 hours, I drive 11 hours. So while he's driving, I'm sleeping, and vice versa. Which is extremely difficult because while you're trying to sleep, that truck is bouncing all over the place. There were times when I felt like somebody punched me in the ribs when he hit potholes. So that was a challenge. Getting some rest under those circumstances were a challenge. I spent an entire year without going home. And I had little kids. I had little children. Not kids, children. I had little children. I spent an entire year away from my house. So after seeing that, how everything operated, I decided to put a deposit on a truck for myself. Then I became an owner-operator. So I incorporated, put the truck under my corporation, and I was paying, because I was getting the truck from the people that I was driving for. It was like a hybrid situation, let's say. I was an owner-operator, but I had to work like an employee. The difference of being an employee and an owner-operator is that I made my own schedule now. Is that a big deal? It can be a big deal, but in all reality, if you're like the average person that wants to get into a truck as an owner-operator or to have your own authority, your expenses are what dictate how much you work. If you got a truck payment, nobody wants to hear why you can't make a payment 1 week. Nobody. You got to have that payment. You want to go on vacation, no problem, but you better have those payments. And owner-operators have different arrangements with different companies. For example, you can have a lease purchase where you're making truck payments every week. Some companies will charge you for the fuel, for what's called the IFTA sticker, for insurance payments, for the $22.90. So when that bill comes through, you got to pay those things. The registration, you got to pay that. It may not sound out of what's normal, but understand you're operating under somebody else's authority when I say lease to own or lease. Lease to own, eventually the truck is going to be yours. They're going to hand you the title to the truck after you finish paying. When you're a lease driver, then you're not purchasing the truck. You're just leasing it. You're leasing it, but you're operating under your own business. So when you're a lease to own, you might have an arrangement where you're going to get a percentage of the load. They might give you 90% of the load, 85% of the load, 75% of the load, depending on the arrangement. Why the difference? Because in some cases, like for example, when it's 90% of the load, you might have to pay all those expenses that I mentioned, but when you're like 75% of the load, you may not have to pay for tolls, you may not have to pay for insurance, you may not have to pay for IFTA. So it varies. It varies. Again, let's go to owning your own authority. Your truck, your company, you answer to only two. The same two that everybody in the street answers to. It doesn't matter who you are, with the exception of one of them. Not one company, one of those bosses. If you're a mega carrier like Knight Swift, for example, you might be self-insured. If you're self-insured, you don't have an insurance company that you pay to. Sounds like that's one less expense. Don't believe the hype. You might be spending more at the end than someone who has an insurance company that they have to pay for. But you got to keep in mind, when a driver gets into an accident or has some kind of mishap, you got to pay some attorneys to represent your company, and that is not cheap. That's very far from cheap. There are settlements in the millions against companies. There was a settlement against Warner, a settlement that was something around $700 million. So don't think for 1 second that just because you're not paying an insurance company that you're just gonna have a much lower expense. No, don't believe that for 1 second. With an insurance company, the insurance company is going to be one of your bosses. And so is the FMCSA. Now, the FMCSA is across the board. So if you decide that you want to have your own authority, keep in mind, you're going to have monthly insurance payments. It can range from $1,200 to $3,000 a month. It all depends on what state you're in. Registration, $2,290. Your IFTA. If you're crossing into states like New York, New Mexico, Oregon, Connecticut, you got to pay a quarterly amount for going on their roads. So there are fees associated to your operation, maintenance that will cost you, repairs that will cost you, and it's all on you now. You have to remember when things need to be renewed, when things need to get paid, compliance, whenever the FMCSA requires some kind of inspection, whatever the case is. Oh, drug and alcohol testing is on you. You got to be a part of, you got to pay a yearly fee to be a part of some third party that vouches for you, your company, your employees. You got all that. Look, just because you have your own authority doesn't mean that you're going to drive 1 or 2 days a week and then sit in your house. No, oh no. And it's all on you. Where it does become an issue is when you want to expand your trucking business and you want to put drivers to either drive for you or drive as owner-operators under your authority. Now you might experience some sleepless nights. Now you're going to have to pick and choose from a pool of drivers that could potentially destroy your business. So which one is better? Okay, so I went from a company driver to lease purchase owner operator to having my own authority and back to
Arabam Dacia, seviyorum çift kalem maça. Göremedik kimseden fayda. İşler